So the situation in New York is getting worse. And the reason that I'm focused on this, I don't live in New York, I live in Israel, but the reason that I'm focused on this is that the battle for Western civilization, the battle against the Red-Green Alliance, against global jihad, and it really is jihad. We have to make no mistake about it. We have to call it what it is, and we'll get into that more a little bit later. But this whole takedown of the West that started decades ago is coming to a head in New York City. Let's frame this the right way. New York City is, simply put, the most important city in the Western world. It's kind of like the capital of the Western world. It became that. There's a reason why the attacks on the Twin Towers happened in New York City. From the enemy's perspective, that is the West. That is capitalism. So both the Marxist and Islamic programs target New York City. And that's why the election of Zoran Mamdani, this Marxist Islamist, to be the mayor of New York City is really something I don't think people fully appreciate. Even all the people who are upset about this, oh, he's a Muslim, oh, he's a leftist, oh, he's a Marxist. We don't realize what this is. This really is a victory for global jihad. So let's take a look at a number of headlines coming out of New York City, and then we'll talk a little bit more about what we are actually seeing. So here we have this news item that Mamdani, New York City Mayor Zoran Mamdani, this was a news item from just the other day. He proposed cutting the NYPD budget. That's the budget for the police force, canceling 5,000 new officer hires. See, what happened was at the end of the Erick Adams, the previous mayor's tenure, he proposed that the city hire 5,000 more officers. However, upon entering office, Mamdani moved to cancel all the orders signed by Adams following his September 26th indictment. Okay, so he's using the fact that Adams was indicted to say, well, we're just going to cancel all of his orders. It includes the 5,000 police officers. Now, what's so important about this is that New York City needs more police officers, and it's not like Mamdani's cutting the budget. As I talked about in my previous video about Mamdani, he actually increased the budget by $11 billion. And meanwhile, he's talking about the budget gap, and we have to fix the budget gap, and what are we going to do? Now, listen to this. Listen to what he says here. The mayor suggested that there were two paths to balancing the budget. One that he painted as putting the burden on the wealthy, and the other that he classified as drawing from vital resources. He pushed for the state to raise taxes on the wealthy and corporations in order to balance the budget, a stance that was in line with his campaign statements. Quote, there are two paths to bridge the gap. The first is the most sustainable and the fairest path. The fairest path. That is the path of ending the drain on our city and raising taxes on the richest New Yorkers and the most profitable corporations, Mamdani said. And if we do not go down the first path, the city will be forced down a second, more harmful path. Faced with no other choice, the city would have to exercise the only revenue lever fully within our own control. We would have to raise property taxes. We would also be forced to raid our reserves to balance the budget as required by the law. Okay, so let's understand. Let's read, let's look through the haze of all of the double speak and all of the socialist language that's in here and understand what we're seeing here. He's saying we have to raise taxes on the wealthy, and that's the fairest thing to do on the wealthy and the corporations. This is the problem with socialism. They do not understand how taxes work, how revenue to the government actually works. They don't understand that if you take more money, take more profits away from corporations and from wealthy people, that means the corporations will lay people off. That means that wealthy people will put their money elsewhere, or they will move out. They'll move their money out of New York. They have the ability to do that. The wealthiest people have the ability to own multiple homes and move around and relocate rather easily. It's middle-class people, especially middle-class people, who have a hard time moving out. Why especially middle-class people? Because people in the lowest rung of society don't usually own property. And that actually makes them more transient. So even if they wanted to leave, now they might also not want to leave, and they're They're the ones who are the beneficiaries, people at the lowest rung of government programs, or in the short term, they get the handouts. But it's the middle class people who own their own property, and have a job somewhere that they rely on to make ends meet. They can't just switch jobs so easily. They can't relocate so easily. They're the ones who end up paying the price if you're raising property taxes and raising taxes on the wealthy. So it's a way of hollowing out the middle class. It's the direct result. Again, the wealthy people are not going to suffer. They will simply leave and figure out other ways to make sure that their money does not get taken away from them in taxes. That's what happens in a free country. You can only get away with stuff like this fully if it's a totalitarian state and you control everyone and no one's allowed to leave. Remember, the Soviet Union didn't allow people to leave, or their totalitarian states, they don't allow people to take their money out. But the United States is not like that. There's nothing preventing wealthy New Yorkers, and certainly corporations, from moving their address somewhere else. And that's why this is going to be a very rapid deterioration of New York if these policies continue. Okay, so that's the police policy. Now, at the same time, there was this story that broke just a couple days ago. New York City's Zoran Mamdani is demanding that the Queens District Attorney, Melinda Katz, drop all charges against Jabez Chakraborty, a 22-year-old schizophrenic man who lunged at two NYPD officers with a large kitchen knife in a brazen attempt to stab them at his home in late January. The body cam footage reveals him bursting through a door, charging at the officers, forcing them to open fire in self-defense, leaving him shot multiple times and hospitalized. A terrible tragedy. Obviously, he's mentally ill, but he did attack these police officers and was shot. Mamdani rushed to visit Chakraborty in the hospital and stated, quote, "No family should have to endure this kind of pain. What they need right now is care, dignity, and support. Jabez should not be prosecuted by the Queens City District Attorney. His handcuffs should be removed, and he should be receiving the care he needs." Now, this whole issue of mental health as a defense in violent crime, it's true. There are many people who commit violent crimes who have mental health issues. In fact, it could be that the commission of a violent crime is a sign of mental health issues. Are we really going to find someone who is psychologically stable committing violent crimes? That would be pretty rare, wouldn't it? So it's almost built in that if we're going to exempt people from prosecution because they have mental instability when they commit violent crimes, that we're really not addressing the problem. We're also sending a terrible signal to police officers that their victims are that their attackers are people that we care more about when police officers get attacked. So this is consistent with wanting to cut the police force. Now, let's remember that Zoran Mamdani, before he was running for office, was an advocate of defunding the police. Of course, during the campaign, he said, no. He never said that. He's a liar, but he's also a Shia Muslim. He's a devout Muslim. And in Islam, it is permissible to lie and deceive the infidel and say whatever it takes, no matter how deceptive it is. It's called the principle of taqiyya in Islam, which means that for the sake of advancing jihad, it is permissible and even recommended to deceive the infidels. And this actually is jihad. What do I mean that it's jihad? Well, in the explanatory memorandum, we've talked about the explanatory memorandum. Let me refresh your memory. Back in the early 2000s, there was a trial called the Holy Land Foundation trial. And this was a big expose of a whole web of organizations in the United States of America that were funding terrorism. They were sending money back, funding Hamas, Hezbollah. They were funding terrorism. And the Muslim Brotherhood, by the way, was an unindicted co-conspirator in this. So was CAIR, the Council for American Islamic Relations. Anyway, in the investigations that of the Holy Land Foundation case, there was a treasure trove, a massive trove of Muslim Brotherhood documents that were found in a basement of a home of a Muslim couple in Annandale, Virginia. And in this trove of documents was a small pamphlet called the Explanatory Memorandum. It was a Muslim Brotherhood pamphlet put out officially by the Muslim Brotherhood. And it was the guidebook, it was the instruction manual for Muslim brothers in North America. And look what it says here. We'll read this again. The process of settlement is civilization jihad process with all the word means. Now let's let that sink in. Let's think of that phrase, civilization jihad. And that's why at the beginning of this video, when I said we are in the jihad right now, I meant that quite literally. I didn't mean it as an alarmist statement. We think of jihad as slaughter, as beheadings, right? What we see coming out of Nigeria periodically, or October 7th. But let's understand that's not the meaning of jihad. Jihad is waging the battle to take over the world. So whatever tools you need to take it over, that's the jihad. And that's what they're saying here. This is civilization jihad, right? The work in America is a kind of grand jihad, eliminating and destroying Western civilization from within. Eliminating and destroying Western civilization from within. So here's New York City the other day. This is Times Square, one of the most iconic locations in America. Okay, Times Square, take a look. This is Times Square just the other day. Massive Islamic prayer gathering. Are there not enough mosques? Is that the issue? Right? Why is this being done in Times Square, in the heart of New York City? Right? Is that it? Not enough mosques? Not enough room for them to pray anywhere else? Why take over Times Square to do this? Why? What is it about?
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
It's cold outside. Look how they're dressed. It's a lot warmer inside a mosque. This is New York City, my friends. New York City. All right. I hope we're getting the point here, everyone. I hope we're really getting the point. This is civilization jihad. That's what it is. It is civilization jihad. The reason they have a prayer gathering like this, in the street in Times Square, is to declare victory. This is identical to the bombing of the World Trade Center. It's identical. It is the takedown of Western civilization. It is jihad by another means. There's civilization jihad, and then there's actual military jihad. These are different types of jihad. Jihad in the end is asserting Islamic dominance. It is removing all other forms of societal governance other than Islam. Islam means submission. That's what we are witnessing here. That's what Zoran Mamdani represents. And what's necessary here is to take down the infidel, to take down the capitalists. Remember, I talked about this in an earlier video, that there's a direct ideological commonality between Marxism, socialism, and Islam. They both don't believe in actual private ownership of property. Everything belongs to Allah, and everything, and you are simply, as an individual, the custodian of it. But because everything belongs to Allah, the truth is, in the Bible it also says ki li kol haaretz in Hebrew, that God owns all the land. But that's in the context of saying that he gave it to each individual, and therefore when individuals sell land to someone else at the Jubilee, they get it back because individual ownership reigns supreme. It's actually the opposite message of what Islam believes and what socialism believes. What Islam believes is that you don't actually own anything. God owns everything. Now, if God owns everything, and there's supposed to be a caliphate, that Islam governs the entire world, and what that means is that all property belongs to the state, but the state is Islam. The state is Dar al-Islam. So you don't actually own any private property. It's actually a socialist Marxist system dressed up as religion. Let me illustrate this another way. We think of Islam as a religion, not as a political movement, even though it has a political aim. And we think of socialism, communism, Marxism as a political ideology, that it's not a religion. Now, let's say instead of looking at Marxism as a political ideology, we said it's a religion. Marx is the prophet. The Communist Manifesto is a holy text. If we just used religious language for it, does that make it not a political movement? What makes something a political movement is what are its aims and what are its tactics. The aims of Islam are governance over all, submission of others. It is a political goal, and its tactics are political as well. As you see here in the streets of New York City, this is a political move. This is a political demonstration. People take to the streets for political reasons. That's why demonstrations exist. That's why mass protests exist in all countries and all cultures as a political move. Because when you take the streets, you are making a political statement. These prayers in the streets of New York are a political statement, plain and simple. That's what this is about. Jihad is not some theoretical concept. And it's not a concept happening somewhere else in the world, in Africa or the Middle East. And it's not something that's going to happen at some point in the future. This is the jihad, and Americans need to learn how to identify it and to fight back, or that will be the end of Western civilization, folks. I hate to be such a downer today. Please like and subscribe. Please drop a comment. Let me know what you think about these videos. I know I'm getting a little bit repetitive, but these are the issues. We have to keep hammering them home and keep reminding ourselves and pointing out what is happening, speaking the truth, and showing everyone else what is happening on a daily basis to understand that these are not isolated incidents. So please drop a comment below. Please like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. And please, of course, keep visiting the Israel 365 News YouTube channel and check out all the great content that we are putting out on a regular basis over there. God bless.